Today on Backtracking, it's got wires that vibrate and bring music. What can this thing be that I found? Hang on. I gotta redo that.
That was a very strange reading. What you accented the wrong syllable. But can this thing be that I found?
That was William Shatner version.
It's like very.
It's got wires that vibrate and bring music. What can this thing be that I found?
What can this thing be?
It's got wires that vibrate and bring music. What can this thing be that I've found? Welcome to Backtracking, the show where two old friends take a second listen to influential bands' catalogs, track by track. I'm Ralph Bagdasarian.
And I'm Dan Fiden. We'll be taking this journey together, providing context, both personal and historical, on some legendary bands. For our first season, we've picked none other than Rush.
The office door closed early. The hidden bottle came out.
Today on Backtracking, it's got wires that vibrate and bring music. What can this thing be? I'm trying to read it, but I have it in my head the way Getty sings it. It's got wires that vibrate and bring music. What can this thing be that I've found? No, it's not some dusty old dulcimer. It's a double-necked Gibson, and it's about to assume control. That's right. It's time for 2112, one of Rush's most well-known and best-loved records.
It sure is, Roth. When the infamous Down the Tubes tour supporting Caressive Steel skidded to a stop, our heroes were out of luck, out of cash, and out of time with their label Mercury Records. But that son of a bitch Ray Daniels flew to the label's HQ in Chicago and did that thing that Daniels do. Mercury granted Rush a reprieve and agreed to one more record so long as the boys in the band promised some radio-ready rockers. Daniels agreed.
But Getty, Alex, and Neil did not. Despite knowing that continuing their proggy turn might cost them their record deal, the band joined Terry Brown and, yet again, entered Toronto Sound Studios in January of 1976. The recording of 2112 would last just about a month, during which time the band concealed their masterwork in progress from Daniels and the label, presumably to prevent their minds from being utterly blown. When completed, it was a blistering 38 minutes and 42-second opus, featuring 6 tracks of earth-shaking progressive rock, including the legendary 20-minute epic 2112. The record was released to an utterly unprepared world in the spring of 1976.
So just how unprepared was the world in 1976? Pretty unprepared for 2112 or the other crazy shit that happened. To wit, George Burns wins a Best Supporting Actor Oscar for The Sunshine Boys. The U.S. Mint reintroduces the $2 bill. And California defeats France in the blind wine tasting A Judgment in Paris. Jimmy Carter is elected, and New York City's Son of Sam serial killer claims his first victim. NASA releases the infamous Face on Mars Viking 1 photos, and Apple Computer is founded with the visionary mission to empower people to endlessly post about the Face on Mars photos on Reddit. So, Roth, 2112. We've got a lot to talk about. This is an absolutely seminal album.
We do. And this is a hard one to unpack because it's so expansive and there's so much, it's so consequential. You're right. I mean, we talked about your mind being blown in the intro. And I mean, my mind is so blown, I'm still picking up the pieces. So I'll do the best I can. Rush reference right there. I'll do the best I can. Those who listen to the podcast, you'll know what I'm talking about. Touches his nose. But yeah, let's get into it.
All right, Ralph. Well, so the first thing that's amazing about this record is that apparently no one remembers the date it was actually released on. And I'm not even lying about this. So the release date across various reference books about Rush varies from March 1st to April 1st, 1976. And there's some discussion about like the band doesn't remember the date it was released. And apparently back in those days, like Thursdays were the day that labeled, like there was a specific day of the week that was the day new records were released. And the date that, you know, originally was thought to be the release date wouldn't have landed on that day. So long story short, generally speaking, people think that April 1st is the release date. That's when Rush on Twitter congratulated themselves on the 40-year anniversary of 2112. But that was the first little mystery about this album.
Yeah, another thing about this album that's I think is worth noting up front is that according to the band themselves, this was the album where they truly found their sound. So if you want to hear sort of like again, according to the band, what Rush really sounds like when they finally had their sort of trademark Rush sound, this is the album where that was first established.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I think we're going to dig a lot into that, but I feel like this album is as close to kind of a perfect representation of the early phases of Rush as we've gotten to date. I'm not going to say it's a flawless album, but I think it's a pretty darn great album. And when they achieve that rushiness, I think they really achieve it well.
Yeah, and I actually started to get a little emotional listening to 2112 from a character's point of view, because there are a lot of themes that are present in 2112 that you'll hear in other Rush songs, like Losing It off of Signals. Chief among them is the notion of having a taste of something and then being denied it. And that's what happens to our protagonist in 2112, as we'll get into it. Now, the album itself, where did the name come from? Do you know?
Roth, I got to tell you, I don't know. I do know that the musical reference in the Overture of 2112 to the 1812 Overture by Tchaikovsky was intentional.
Yes.
And I believe, though maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, that they selected the year 2112 knowing about that 1812 reference, but I'm not certain about that. So maybe you can
almost
set me
there.
straight.
Yes. Yeah. So 2112, they wanted to be evocative of 1812, the War of 1812, the 1812 Overture. Remember, these are Canadians too, and there are our nemesis. We grew up in Buffalo,
long vanquished Roth.
Yeah, but there was Fort Niagara. I mean, we had like vivid. I would go to Fort Niagara as a child, and I would pretend like I'm aiming those cannons at Canada and shooting them. Especially St. Catharines right across the way. So I might have been shooting at Neil Peart. Anyways, yeah. So they were aware of that reference. Neil Peart wanted there to be a palindrome, the name to be a palindrome. That's how they came up with 2112. So number 12 backwards, 21. There you go.
It's an awesome name. I mean, it's really with the benefit of hindsight and kind of knowing how much a part of the kind of prog rock, prog metal music vernacular it's become. I really do think it's an awesome choice that they named the album 2112.
Yeah, and if I could live to 137 years old, which is possible. I mean, it's not likely, but it's possible with the modern technology. If I could live to 137 years old, I will live to see the year 2112. In fact, that would be a really great year to die.
Wow. Well, Roth, that's very morbid. Why don't we move on to the album art?
Yes.
Hugh Syme, my friend. Yeah, I'm going to tell you about Hugh Syme. So Hugh Syme actually plays a huge role in this record in a couple of ways that we're going to, one way is he actually, played some instruments on this album. I don't know if you know that. But Hugh Syme is responsible for
he did the opening, right? The
Mellotron kind of stuff. So he actually, is a musician on this album, but obviously he took care of the album cover. It depicts a naked man facing away from the camera, thankfully. So we just get the ass, and the red star of the Solar Federation. So the red star of the Solar Federation is a reference, obviously, to 2112. It is briefly, the actual red star is briefly mentioned in the lyrics.
The red star proudly high in hand.
That's exactly right. Oh. So that's really what the cover is. Other than that, there's a yet another text treatment of the name of the band and the album name. My personal opinion on this album cover is there are just a couple of things that are, I think, worth noting about it. One is it is a really awful text treatment again, and it includes some pre-Photoshop lens flare effects, which are kind of stunning to me. I think overall, this is again, it's an improvement from Fly By Night. I think it's a lateral move from Caress of Steel. But it really still, in my opinion, falls short of a lot of the Hugh Syme covers that we start to see actually beginning with the next album.
Yeah, and you can kind of or almost smell the bromine in the water in the studio where they shot that the red star projected onto the water. That's what this evokes for me when I look at the album cover. What I do like looking at about the album cover, though, is the interior of the album, which you can't really see it unless you go online and look for it, because there are a couple of things of note. One is the circuit board that they used. I'm dying to know, and if any of our listeners know this, please reach out to us. I'm dying to know what that circuit board was to. I have the feeling it was like for like a refrigerator, maybe some inane piece of technology from the 1970s that they just picked out of like a dusty like cardboard box in someone's basement, or went down to the local True Value hardware store and picked out and said, this looks futuristic. With Star Wars coming out a year or two before this, they used a lot of 1970s technology for science fiction purposes. And I think Rush, and maybe Hugh Syme was responsible for this. I know you love him. I do too. But they might have thought it was just as easy as picking up some 1970s technology and throwing some dramatic lighting on it. And therefore you have Star Wars. Boom. No, there was no they did no distressing of the technology. They didn't paint it. They didn't do something creative with it. They just showed us a freaking empty circuit board. There weren't even any circuits on it. It was an empty circuit board. I'm like, this doesn't even do anything. There are no circuits. It's just an integrated circuit board.
The most ridiculous thing, though, I think you've got to admit about the art on this album, again, interior art, I actually think it was the back cover art, was the band photo. So This is really the band photo that began the space kimono meme, right? Uh-huh. They are there in all of their 1970s prog rock glory. You have Alex looking absolutely effeminate in, I think, white satin head to toe, which is a strong choice. You've got Neil sporting the epic mustache and epic hair that he has through a lot of this era that I actually think is a high point for Neil stylistically. But he's wearing a kimono and he's got his foot up on some kind of something, not sure what it is. You can't really see it in the photo. And then you've got Gad, who is looking very youthful, has very long hair, also wearing a kimono. And if my recollection is correct, I'm not looking at the photo as I'm speaking, but if my recollection is correct, he's showing a lot of chest as well. Is that right?
He is a bit of it. I was just searching the internet, man, and you're not going to believe this. You can buy a Rush 2112 album poster bed sheet duvet cover. Can you believe that? It's black and silky smooth, and it's got the integrated circuit board on it. It's got the naked man. It doesn't have that photo of Rush. It has the other one, the individual shots.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a conversation with my wife tonight.
I think that would be.
Well, so as crazy looking as this the back of the album looks, that wasn't the greatest subject of ridicule in the album. It was actually Alex's hat that he's wearing inside. He's wearing this white, like Tony, who's Scarface?
Yeah, it's like Tony Montana. Yeah, so you're saying it looks like a Panama hat? I actually was thinking it looks almost more like he's playing a woman on The Crown, you know? It's like a fat, I believe those are called fascinators, Roth.
Apparently that was picked up by his wife, Charlene, who he's still married to. And, maybe he was confused. Charlene was picking it out for herself, and he thought she was suggesting it to him. Well, listen, if your marriage can survive your wife picking out that hat and then photographing it for posterity, like, it can survive anything. So I think it was good for them personally, not so great for the band's image. Well, it is. I guess we can probably put a pin in this one, or a period at the end of this sentence. I think that the cover art, the interior art, all of it, some highs, some lows. I think overall they're making progress from some of the earlier albums, but I don't think, as iconic as the Red Star of the Federation has become within kind of Rush lore, I don't think it's a super strong cover. No. Moving on to production and arrangements. Terry Brown, you motherfucker. Terry, if you're listening, we love you. Greg Daniels, not so much.
So, so I mean, listen, Terry Brown is back, credited with production.
Go ahead, sorry.
Co-credited with production, with the band, credited with arrangements again here. We can just maybe talk a little bit about the sound of the record. I think there are a few things that are worth noting here, but my opinion is that it is a much more layered sound than any of the previous records. A lot more multi-tracking, some interesting different instrumentation showing up here. And just generally speaking, I feel like it's a much less live sounding album. What do you think, Ralph?
Yeah, and if you go back to Caress of Steel, God damn it. Go back to Caress of Steel, you hear moments where they touch into the sound that would become 2112, but it's not as deliberate, it's not as layered, as structured as it is in 2112. I think with 2112, there was a higher degree of confidence, and I think a lot of that confidence stemmed from the fact that Caress of Steel was such a failure. And they basically said, look, if we're going to go down, we're going to go down on our terms. So we're going to do the album we want to make. And that is actually quite fitting with the theme of Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead, which is all about uncompromising artistic creativity. So things I think the sound is a product of two things. One is they've been playing a lot longer together. They're comfortable, but I think a lot of it is also that it matched the what was really driving. Like, it was a deeply personal album for them. It wasn't just let's whip some stuff together and try and figure out our sound. I think they had a very clear vision for what they wanted to accomplish with this album, and it shows in the lyrics and it shows in the recording and the sound of the album itself.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I think that this album, it's hard to say for sure, but you could make the argument that this album is a testament to the power of burning your ships behind you, right? Mm-hmm. The old kind of adage about burning the bridge behind you, burning the ships behind you. It appears as though, in this album, they knew that they were facing being dropped by Mercury and had a really clear realization that this may be their last opportunity to record an album as Rush. Or certainly their last obvious opportunity to record an album as Rush. And rather than just kind of caving and capitulating to what they thought the label might want, they decided, we're going to do the album of our dreams. This may be our last shot at doing it, so let's make it as great as we can. And I think they were able to achieve something really special here.
And I think writ large, when you have limited resources and you have nothing to lose, it can really, spurn creativity in a way that having unlimited resources can sort of hinder that creativity. I think if you look at like a big budget movie where they've got like a $500 million budget, it could be like, But if you look at some
smaller movie,
smaller movie without as much money, sometimes you get a much, much better result.
Yeah, that's right. So I just want to stay on the sound of the record really quickly for a minute. So the guitars, Ralph, one of my notes here is that I felt like the guitars and the layering of the guitars in particular really was a great sound. I feel like it was a big evolution. There was certainly multi-tracking of guitars that happened on the previous records, but I feel like there was a lot more of it. And I also think there was a lot of 12-string on this album that I don't recall hearing on any of the previous albums. Did you pick up any of that, Ralph?
Yeah, I don't hear any 12 strings on any previous Rush albums, and I've consciously noted it in the past, but not on this listening. I didn't.
Yeah, well, I felt like the 12 string actually in a few different spots was a really nice addition. The only other thing about the sound of the album that I wanted to make a quick note of was the drum sound. Actually, I'll talk about the drums, then I'll talk about bass. But the drum sound, I felt like the kick drums in particular have an amazing sound that's an improvement on the previous albums. Very, very punchy and awesome sounding. And the other thing that I think is notable on here is Neil seems to be taking advantage of the sound of the toms, the panning of the toms, in these huge fills that he does that are kind of complete tom-tom fills that go all the way from his high toms to his low toms or all the way from his low toms to his high toms. There are a few of these fills on, and with the panning that they do when you're listening to the album on headphones, it's just, they sound absolutely enormous.
They sound like he's wearing that kimono while he's recording in the studio. In fact, that's something I would like to know, is did they wear the space kimonos while they were working in the studio, or do they wear something a little less comfortable? Because nothing's more comfortable than the space kimonos.
I don't know that we'll ever know that. And then I think the last thing on the sound of the record, maybe not so much the sound, but just the playing that maybe we can talk about a little bit later. I feel like Geddy's bass playing on this album is much busier. He's really like kind of feeling himself on this album, and he's playing a lot more notes. I guess it's like the only way to say it. There's a lot more bass fills. I feel like the bass lines are a little bit more complicated, and there's a couple of places in the song by song notes that I made that I'll point that out.
Okay, yeah, I didn't hear that, being the bass player among the two of us.
Okay, so you're saying I'm wrong.
But I'm not saying you're wrong.
No,
I'm just saying
you're saying I'm wrong.
It didn't strike me as being busy. I would say like Hold Your Fire is busier. All right.
We're going to count the notes. We're going to do an analysis. We're going to do a note by note.
Spice. Too many notes. A young man trying to impress upon beyond his abilities.
All right. So do you want to? Do you want to get into the song by song?
So 2112 is the first song, but it really is 7 songs. So I'm thinking we play a little clip from each of the sections, because we kind of have to. Because like, what do you pick as a less than 15-second clip from 2112? Yeah. So this song is broken into 7 sections. I'll name them off real quick, and then we'll get into it. First section is the overture, like the 1812 symphony by Tchaikovsky. There's an overture. Number 2, it goes and uses the same motif as the overture. It's the Temples of Syrinx. It establishes the antagonists of the story, the priests of the Temples of Syrinx. Number 3 is discovery. This is when our protagonist discovers a new form of artistic expression. 4 is called presentation. This is where he presents his discovery very naively to the priests, and he's shot down. Then number 5 is oracle, the dream. This is where the oracle shows him this elder race that had all these creative tools at their disposal and how they flourished. Number 6 is the soliloquy, which is the penultimate part of the character, where he contemplates doing something drastic. And then the final one is called aptly the grand finale. And we won't divulge what happens in the grand finale until we get there.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get started. I'm excited.
So the first is Overture. Let's take a listen.
All right. Now, the first thing that I would probably point out here is there are 47 seconds of pure atmospherics to open this album. 47 seconds, where really it's just kind of Hugh Syme making noises on, like, I don't know, a Moog and a Mellotron or something. But it's very cool sounding, but it's a lot of time to just kind of noodle at the opening of an album. Pretty bold choice.
And you know what? I'm a lifelong Rush fan. I sometimes fast forward through the Starfield. Don't feel guilty if you do it. It's okay.
Oh, really?
Yes. It depends on the context. I mean, sometimes you want to hear the overture. You just don't want to hear noodling on a keyboard. No, it's more than noodling. And it is basically traveling to this distant galaxy, right, where the priests are. That's what the purpose of this. And
that's what it makes you feel.
Well, and then it subsides, and now you're hanging in just interstellar space. And then suddenly you're blindsided by,
yeah. So
Rush comes in.
So the herky jerky counting stuff. I talked about the herky jerky counting stuff that they started to get into in the last episode where we covered Caress of Steel. But these kind of musical moments where it really is just they synchronously will play notes, very staccato notes with kind of rests in between them, and there's just a lot of like the band being kind of tight that's required in order for them to make sense, and a lot of counting that's required, right?
But I don't recall hearing a hurdy-gurdy though. You
No,
mentioned
I meant herky jerky.
Oh, herky
There's
jerky.
no herky jerky. Herky jerky. So I think of these as like these herky jerky kind of like, watch us, we can play, we're a really tight band. But clearly they kind of fell in love with that stuff on Caress of Steel, and they loved it so much they decided to start their epic track on this album with it.
Well, I mean, they fucked up the ending of What You're Doing on the first album, where they tried to do the hits in unison and they had to mess around with the mixing board to get it to work. Yeah, but they reward us if we afford them the indulgence of all this herky jerky kind of weird time signature stuff. They reward us when they get into the groove, right? I mean, they're again. This is Rush's like riff driven rock at its finest, I would say.
Yeah. It's true. I would also say that there's a guitar solo that begins at 3 minutes, and I believe that is still in the overture. I don't actually have the times for the overture in here, but
yeah. What about the guitar solo?
I just wanted to say that I think it's an absolutely killer guitar solo that starts at 3 minutes. I mean, he just comes in with this like one note, and it's just like, and it's just such a great guitar solo. I feel like this is the first of what ends up being many, many absolutely scorching guitar solos from Alex Lifeson on this album.
Well, and this also has one of the most anthemic motifs in Rush's catalog. This is where they do the dun 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 dun, and then hey dun 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 hey. So if you've ever been to a Rush show, there's only one thing you got to say in those breaks, and that's hey.
Yeah, that's right.
And at the end of it, of course, there is the Alex Lifeson paying homage to the 1812 Overture with the little dun 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 and the guitar. I don't have much more to say about this. It's just music. I have a lot more to say about the story, the lyrics.
I have one more thing to say about the overture. It's really a question for you.
Yeah.
And I want to contrast this a little bit with what we talked about when we covered Fountain of Lamnath on the Caress of Steel episode. One of the comments that I had about Fountain of Lamnath was, while they kind of describe it as a single piece of music, it really feels to me more like a concept album that is just half of an album. When what I mean by that is each of the kind of musical ideas that are represented in that song are in my opinion very distinct. They repeat one musical idea twice. But other than that, it's just kind of, it feels to me like a number of discrete songs. With Overture, I actually feel like and throughout 2112, the piece holds together as a single musical piece, and the musical ideas feel much more connected and interrelated than anything they've done before. And for that reason, I feel like 2112 is really their first successful kind of prog opus.
Yeah, Dan, I hate to say this, but I agree with you 100%. So this was written, as Geddy Lee explains in his book, My Effin' Life. I can't say the actual title because it's a bad word. Actually, no, it's actually called My Effin' Life. This was written in bits and pieces. They would sit down in between writing songs, in between breaks on the previous album, and they would just basically take this mishmash of disparate song segments, and that's what became this song. But the overture ties the themes together. Like, it actually is like a real overture. Yeah. It takes themes from each of the elements, and it there's a more rocking, it's drawn out, it's a little slower, leading us into, and I think is part of the guitar solo, that's Soliloquy, right? So you do have actual musical motifs in each of these sections that you hear in the overture, and they tie together really, really well.
They really do. I think it's as we discussed last week, I think Fountain of Lamnath has incredible high points, but it really just feels like a conceptually connected album without kind of a lot of deep musical connection, and this is very different. This feels like a single piece. Anyway, I'm ready to move on if you are, Ralph.
Yeah, so to take us into Temple of Syrinx, so the overarching theme or motif in Overture takes us and borrows from and leads us into the second movement of this symphonic rock opera. It's not really a rock opera, it's more of a rock motion picture. I think the band would agree. Rock novel. It's a rock novel. I don't know if anyone's used that before, but we're going to coin that phrase right now. So taking us into the second chapter of this rock novel is The Temples of Syrinx. Let's give it a listen. I think that was dramatic.
I think it was so dramatic. Can we just talk about the fact that at 16 minutes into the song, there's just explosion sounds?
Is it 16
there's just
minutes
like
into the song? Isn't it like a 20-minute long song total?
No. It must be. I must have copied this down wrong. It must be 6 minutes in. It's at the end of
right before, and the meek must inherit.
Yeah, exactly. There's just explosion sounds. I
want to find that because they didn't really blow shit up. There must have been a stock.
No, it totally sounds like stock sound effects. Like they just if you actually listen to them, the fidelity of the explosions is really quite low compared to the recorded music. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, the sound effects are kind of like the Wilhelm scream. Have you heard of the Wilhelm scream?
Yes.
It's like the same scream you hear everywhere. And I'm wondering, I think you could do like a whole like a Dead Eyes type of podcast, like a mystery podcast where you find what those sound effects were and where else they were used. And I bet it's an amazing story. So anyone who's got that, the resources to do that, it's a free idea.
Yeah, those explosion sounds they're clearly trying to represent something. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but there are just explosions. I mean, it doesn't get too much more epic than to end one movement of a song with just massive explosion sounds.
But they're like 70s explosions, so they're a little muted. They're not like crystal clear. They had to have been recorded in the 1950s or 60s or something. So Temples of Syrinx. So this is establishing the antagonists of our story, and these are the high priests of the Temple of Syrinx, and they basically are the gatekeepers and the keepers of all of the world's culture, all of their technology, all of their knowledge, and they protect that and they govern it and they dole it out to the people with an iron fist. The goal of which is establishing a mean person, and what I mean by mean, I mean average, like MEAN, mean average person, and establishing that as the baseline human for this civilization. And you need to just stay in line and be an average person, and that's it.
And they do all this using what inside of pyramids that are described as being filled with computers. Mm-hmm. Minor point, but I don't know.
Great computers. They fill their hollowed walls.
I like the computer thing. So the music for this one, for me, absolutely rocking section. I would say probably the most famous section of this song. Would you disagree? Maybe the overture is.
No, this is definitely the most rockin'. The most rockin' parts of the overture are essentially clips from the Temples of Syrinx. But I think when you talk about the meaning of what he's establishing here, and when I say he, Neil Peart, and by proxy Ayn Rand. How do you say it? Do you say Ayn Rand? And
I say Ayn Rand, but I don't know if that's right.
And there's a line in here: "Look around this world we made, equality our stock in trade. Come and join in the brotherhood." So you get the sense that the priests their intentions are altruistic. And I think you see a lot of parallels to society in the 70s and even society today, where this notion of equity, equality is noble. It is right. It is just, but it can be taken to a point where, and I think the priests of the Temple of Syrinx are taking it to this point where they don't want anyone to excel in any way for fear of losing this average sensibility of what an average person ought to be. And this is a theme that comes up over and over and over and over again in Rush's lyrics. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I think I jumped the lyrics a little too soon.
No, I think that's fine. I don't have too much to say about this section. I mean, I think it's the most rockin' section of the music. The lyrics, I read through the lyrics. I know the lyrics pretty well for this section of the song.
But I think that this
song, but
I don't want to beat that dead horse with a stick, but I think there's this sense though that you can take something that is the intentions of which are altruistic, and it can, you can end up, sacrificing other beliefs and creating a world that is not free, that is not, liberal with a small L, right? And I think that's what is being established here, is that like we have this grand vision, this idea for equality and equity, but what are the ramifications of that?
Yeah.
And that's the world into which our protagonist was born. And that's the world that he knows nothing other than that.
Yep. All right. Well, anything else to talk about with Temples of Syrinx?
No, this is just establishing the antagonist, and we're going to meet the protagonist in the next chapter of this rock novel called Discovery.
What can this strange device be? When I touch it, it gives forth a sound. It's got wires that vibrate and give music. What can this thing be that I've found?
So, have you ever read Ready Player One?
I have.
You have? Do you remember what he needs to do to Wade Watts, what he has to do to get the crystal key?
God, I don't remember. I mean, he had to do a bunch of things to get it, right?
Yeah. So he had to learn to play this. Listen.
Did Ernest Cline actually say that in the book?
Yes, in the book they called out. I mean, talk about a deep catalog reference, and it wasn't even 80s, because the movie was most about 80s, and this is 70s. So it would have been something that Holloway, who is like the creator of the Oasis, who passed away and set all these avatars onto this wild quest. He goes into, I think it was a cave or something, just like the story is in the rock novel 2112, and he has to play the third section of 2112, and he's given a guitar. It's a Gibson, and he has to play that passage. And I remember reading the book, and I'm like, oh my God, I know how to play it. I would have gotten the crystal key. And I was so looking forward to the movie to see how they were going to do that scene. And of course, it was just cut out of the movie entirely. It wasn't even in there.
Yeah. The movie was pretty forgettable, but that's actually that's amazing, Ralph. I don't remember that. I read the book a long time ago. I don't remember that, but that's a great call out. Another, I think, call out here is more sound effects.
Yeah.
The water of the sound of water, presumably from the creek and the waterfall that's described here, is playing. I'm not pointing that out just to kind of make fun of it. I think it's interesting that they're using these sound effects so aggressively here, because it really is just representative of how much less live this album is, or maybe a different way to say it would be how much more heavily produced it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which I like. But I think it's a departure.
But they have done shows where they've played 2112 in its entirety live, and it is playable live. But there are a lot of effects.
I mean more that this is a departure from the way they were recording their earlier records. Like there's a progression of the number of overdubs and things that they're doing on each record, from Rush through Fly By Night through Caress of Steel. But I feel like 2112, they fully embrace that for the first time, where the instrumentation is much more varied. They're doing things like sound effects. It's just much more of like a let's get rangy in the studio kind of a recording.
Yeah, but in the Ernest Cline novel too, by the way, the Avatar has to travel to a place called Syrinx and locate Alex Lifeson's Les Paul. So,
oh my God, how did I not remember that?
Go back and read it. That's funny. I remember my mind was blown on top of being blown by the music, by also Ernest Cline's novel. So this is where the protagonist picks up the guitar, and in the song he's actually playing the music. That's the idea, and he's describing the guitar. He's never seen one before, and a guitar is a piece of technology. It's something that was created by man or humanity, and it's the fire inside of him that he's just, like a child sees this. Oh my God! Like, this is what the things I'm feeling. I gotta take this to the priests. They need to know about this.
So are you okay to move on to the music a little bit more?
Yeah, let's talk about the music.
Okay, so the music in Discovery, it's probably going to annoy you, Rafi, but I will say that Discovery, the Discovery, that movement, kind of generally speaking, very sweet, 12-string, reminds me of Led Zeppelin in Going to California mode. Not that that's like, not that
Why would it make me upset?
Well, I think as you listen through these podcasts,
I love Led Zeppelin. Are you kidding
every
me?
time I mention Led Zeppelin, you're kind of like, well, I just hate Led Zeppelin. But
I don't hate them. I just don't think they have the alchemy Rush has.
Well, alchemy aside, I do. It was a little bit evocative to me, but I mean, it's almost folky in its in its tone, I guess. But I think what's so cool about Discovery is how sweet, how earnest, how genuine it sounds. And it really sets you up for this amazing shift when you get into presentation. It flows into presentation extremely well in terms of like the instrumentation. I think that kind of 12-string continues into the kind of protagonist part of presentation. And it sets you up for the priest to really hammer you. We'll talk about that when we get to presentation. But I think Discovery is very sweet, very folky, soft.
Very short too. And they both musically and lyrically, in terms of the story, they build this sense of pride, of achievement, of accomplishment, and like, this character. So any great story, the protagonist needs a desire, a want, and it's represented in musicals with the "I Want" song, and this is sort of the "I Want" song for the protagonist, and it does such a great job of bringing you in and empathizing with what he's feeling, hearing the music, because you're listening to them play the music too. So you know what this character is feeling, and it really draws you in and makes you vested into the character, and you're rooting for him. You're like, okay, he's gonna revolutionize the society by bringing this new discovery to the masses.
Yeah, I mean, I think the musical tone and the lyrics fit together. I think thematically it sounds and lyrically feels like the protagonist is very naive to me. It's a naive sounding section, I think. Yeah,
it's interesting because he's naive, but not of his own doing. He's naive because he's been shielded from this elder race of man that we come to learn, once had this technology.
Yeah, but that naivete, I think, bookends with when we get to Soliloquy. It's like there's ultimate kind of naivete, and then that gets bookended with this kind of like complete loss of innocence that's represented in Soliloquy. But we'll talk about that more when we get to that.
Yeah, well, why don't we get into presentation, which is chapter 4, because this is where the two worlds collide.
Okay, let's do it.
So he comes before the priest. His first words are, "I know it's most unusual to come before you so." And the music at this moment is very jaunty. It's very kind of like, "Hey, I'm going into the temple of Syrinx, man, and they're going to love me. They're going to praise my name," right? So what happens? He presents this to the priest. What happens, Dan? You tell the folks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll tell you, the priest basically shit on him. They take a big shit on his idea. They take a big shit on his guitar, and they just really tell him to, it's not necessary.
They scream at him.
They scream at him. I know. Well, that's after he appeals the first time. It really is like this very interesting exchange between the protagonist and the priests here. That comes across very clearly. I mean, it's a very straightforward narrative in these lyrics, but it's great. And I think one of the things that makes this section of the song, this movement, my personal favorite movement of the song, is how clearly their musical choices the kind of stylistic choices that they're making during the protagonist sections and the priest sections are so heavily contrasted that it really is clear that there are different characters speaking with different emotions, right?
Oh yeah.
Like
it's
and I
done
love
brilliantly. It's done brilliantly. Like it's not contrived. It's not pretentious. It like fits musically. It fits lyrically. It's just really great storytelling.
And you hear Geddy's in some ways, Geddy uses these two qualities of voice that we've talked about a little bit in the previous albums really, really well here. He uses that sweet kind of schoolboy sounding voice for the protagonist. And then as soon as the priests start talking, he busts into the shriek, that kind of Geddy Lee shriek that I think a lot of people think of when they think of Rush.
Yeah, and to pinpoint it to like one phrase where he says, "The world can use this beauty," right? The way he says it in the midst of all this screaming and dismissiveness from the priest is just like he's naive, this character, but he also is standing up for himself. He's saying, "No, this can't be. Like you don't understand what I'm feeling."
Yeah,
and they just completely dismiss it outright.
Now, another thing that I wanted to highlight about this section of the song that I love, and it's very subtle, but I know you're going to know what I'm talking about. And it follows on the comment that I just made about the stylistic choices between the protagonist sections and the priest sections. There is a slight reduction in tempo when the priests start talking. Have you noticed that? It's very, very slight. It may actually not even be a reduction in tempo, but it's a change in feel where maybe they're playing a little bit behind. It's a little bit draggy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it gives it this heavy, menacing feel. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's such a subtle choice, but I think it makes an incredible difference. I really think that it changes this kind of jangly 12-string section where the protagonist is talking. Obviously, the distorted guitar comes in and everything, and Neo really starts kind of like smashing the drums. But that slight change in feel, I think, gives it it makes the most difference of anything that they do.
And I think that illustrates a general point with music, which is, you could be a guitarist that shreds, who is technically, no one can do it better, but does it, like, what's the point? Like, where does it go? And I think that with the guideposts of a really great story here, with those moments where Pierre is sort of just behind the beat or playing some weird sort of syncopation or side rhythm, whatever it is, everyone is doing their job musically, lyrically, to tell this story, and all these layers create like a really vivid visual of where this person is and what's going on. You know how I said this about Caress of Steel? I said it right that time. How it was like watching like a Harry Potter movie to me. It was like this even more so, because it paints such a crystal clear, vivid visual of the story that you just close your eyes and you are there. And it's better than a movie because it's whatever you envision in your head is what you're seeing.
Yeah. Now, one more point that I want to make about presentation, minor point. Are there any more famous drum fills in all of rock and roll history than the drum fills that appear throughout presentation, and particularly in the beginning of presentation? These are the absolute. I think that when people kind of like think of Rush stereotypes, they think of like air drum stereotypes, and they think of these huge like left to right like air drum fills, right?
You got those fills.
I think that whole perception comes from presentation and the fills that he plays here. He certainly plays huge fills in other songs and earlier songs, but these are just so overwhelmingly epic. And like I was saying earlier, they pan from left to right. I mean, they're just awesome.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. I mean, they're not, for the lay listener, they're not like if you hear them, it's not like you'll recognize necessarily the drum fills, but it's the ilk of the drum fills. It's like that style of like from like 270 degrees to like 0 degree, Neil Peart. Yeah. I mean, they're awesome. They're just awesome. They're so ostentatious, but they fit so well in this section. Yeah. So he's dismissed by the priests, and they basically say, "Don't annoy us anymore. We've got work to do. Just think about the average." Like they basically send him away. They take the guitar, break it over their knee. I don't know if they break it, but they take the guitar and they're basically like, "Go away, little man." And that leads us into the next one, which is called Oracle: The Dream. And let's give it a listen. A lot happens here.
I stand the troubled spiral stare, and Oracle confronts me there. He leads me on light years away through astral nights, galactic days. I see the works of gifted hands that grace the strange and wondrous land. I see the hand of man.
Oracle. This is an interesting section, and I think this is lyrically maybe the only. This is where the album starts to get opaque lyrically. It is unclear whether this is purely a vision. This is like a dream. He's dreaming about a place that doesn't exist. That's not entirely clear, or whether there is some literal oracle who has projected this image to him, whether he's in some real kind of meaningful literal contact with some other civilization elsewhere in the universe. That's the way I read it.
Well, okay, so it's very interesting you bring this up, because even Ged mentions this in his book about the ending, and we'll get to the grand finale and talk about that in a little more detail, but he talks about the ambiguity of the ending of the story. But let's look at the facts. So in presentation, the priests themselves tell him about this technology that helped destroy the elder race of man. And in Oracle: The Dream, he speaks of the elder race. So he's had his hands on, literally, a piece of technology that the elder race used to create. So he's had a taste of what the elder race had. The priests told him that this elder race existed and that it helped destroy them. They had a different take on what the technology's ends were. And so I think he is taking what he's learned. Okay, there was an elder race and they had these fascinating technologies. Maybe they weren't all bad. Maybe it was actually good. Maybe, so this is what this dream is him traveling, vis-a-vis the oracle to the elder race, to see not only the guitars that they have, but the art and the creativity and the independence of thought. So this is him dreaming.
But is he literally traveling in some kind of magical way to see a real place, or is he using what you've just said, that kind of moment with the priests and the reference to the elder race, to dream of a society that doesn't actually exist?
I think he's dreaming of a society that does exist. I think.
Okay, so you're saying that he just coincidentally is dreaming of a society that does exist.
I mean, for Christ's sake, suspend your disbelief. We're just at a temple of Syrinx that you're
No, Rob, no. Listen, either the Oracle came to visit him and he was, played by John Leguizamo, let's just say it's John Leguizamo. Okay, John Leguizamo comes down.
You just plus the album for me. It's an even better album now. Okay, so John Leguizamo comes down.
But I think that this is a, maybe it's more mystical and strange if he is in fact dreaming of a place that does exist and there's no explanation for how that could be happening. But I do think our decision about how to interpret these lyrics must have an impact on how we interpret grand finale, Roth.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a line from the lyrics. I'm reading this verbatim.
Verbatim. You're a verbatim.
I got a verbatim in the closet here.
You keep on verbatim, you're going to go blind, Roth.
So the elder race still learn and grow. Their power. Okay, before that, he says they left our planet long ago. This is John Leguizamo presumably speaking to the protagonist, whose name we don't know. They left our planet long ago. The elder race still learn and grow. Their power grows with purpose strong to claim the home where they belong. Home to tear the temples down. Home to tear the temples down. So there is a intervention here that's being planned by the elder race. Whether that's what he's dreaming or whether it's in reality, we don't know.
Yeah,
And-
I would
and the
say
plot
that
gets
this
thicker
is
after
really
Soliloquy.
this is the core.
Interesting.
Okay, this is the core thing about the soliloquy. Okay, I think we now need to kind of move towards the end of the lyrics of the soliloquy. So clearly what's happening here is he kills himself.
So we didn't listen to Soliloquy yet, did we?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm spoiler alert. Guys,
But we don't
you can
know.
just
But
turn
no,
that-
there's
All right.
debate around that too.
All right, well,
So let's
why don't we
listen to
go
it.
on?
Let's talk
We'll go
about
on to soliloquy. All right.
it. Okay, this is Soliloquy, section 6 from 2112 by Rush.
Just think of what my life might be in a world like I have seen. I don't think I can carry on this cold and empty life.
Okay, so
All right.
he kills
Guys,
himself.
he kills himself.
End of story.
You know, you'll never believe what happens in that M. Night Shyamalan movie. Bruce Willis is actually a ghost, guys.
Oh, geez.
So, anyway, soliloquy. I think that the thing that, you know, when we go back to the Oracle, if the protagonist was somehow truly in belief that the message that he received during the movement Oracle was true, why would he kill himself, and why would he not just wait for the elder race to return to Megadon or whatever it's called?
I think he that common theme of having a taste of something and then being denied it is so crushing that he just can't stand for it. But it's interesting. So a couple of things. One is our protagonist here naked man? And if
Yes.
he kills himself, is that why we never see him again?
Well, we do see him
or-
again in Hemispheres. You see a naked man on the cover of Hemispheres.
Yeah, but is that him with, like, now that he's discovered the elder
Rafi?
race and now he's in a surrealist painting?
There is no mistaking that man ass.
But I think that, and then if he's also the guy moving
Honestly,
pictures, I'm moving.
I don't-
So no, but this is
I don't
very
know.
important. Let's put a pin in that, but this is very important. So the song ends. I'm just going to start because we already started talking about it. He doesn't commit suicide necessarily. He just says, "My lifeblood spills over." That's the end of it. That's the last
Yeah.
we hear from him.
Yeah.
If you slit your wrists and you survive, your lifeblood is still spilled over. If you slit your wrists and you die, your lifeblood is spilled over. So we don't know if
Ralph,
he
I'm
actually
strongly disagreeing.
died.
You don't refer to it as lifeblood unless it's being spilled while you're dying, I don't think.
It's blood.
It's not like when you go to like the Red Cross, they're like, "Hey, come in and give your lifeblood."
But that's what you're doing. If they were to say that,
But nobody would say that.
in fact, if you're from the Red Cross marketing team, you should do a whole lifeblood campaign. It's very compelling.
They should do a soliloquy
lifeblood.
themed lifeblood. Let your lifeblood spill over at your local donation center. I
Your
mean, wow,
lifeblood
nobody's
cup
gonna do that.
spilleth over.
If they called you and they're like, "Hey, Ralph, we just need your lifeblood real fast," you'd be like, "Fuck no." I mean, all right. So listen,
Well, he refers to it as a dream. So he says, "The sleep is still in my eye. The dream is still in my head." So
Yep.
according to the protagonist, that was a dream he just had. It wasn't being transported to another place.
Yeah.
So he was just imagining. Like,
Yeah.
and he says, what does he say? He says, in a world, just think about what life could be in a world that I have seen. So he keeps
I don't
going
think I
back
can
and
carry
forth.
on.
Yeah.
So I think that the core irony, the cruel irony of this, and we'll get to it when we get to grand finale, but I think this is really the cruel irony. The story that's being told here is of the protagonist. He finds the guitar, he presents it, he's turned down. He has this dream that he thinks is just a dream, right? He genuinely does not believe that this elder race is coming back. He thinks that he's imagining this real world place. So in soliloquy, he's like, he wakes up and he's just like, "Oh fuck, why did I have to wake up? That was such a beautiful place. I don't live in that place. I'm going to kill myself.
But because
And
he discovered the guitar, he knows that this place exists in essence, whether or not it's literally in existence. So he's experienced what this place could be like in reality.
He knows that there could be a place like this, but he doesn't know that this place does in fact exist. What he knows is that some place that had music, had musical instruments, used to exist before the priests.
And I just want to point out that we're having this conversation free of any kind of licit or illicit drugs, and it just goes to show you the depth of where Rush goes.
It's right. The depth is remarkable, fathoms.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think this is the way that I always interpret it. I feel like there's, that old Christmas story. I can't remember the name of it, where the one guy gets a comb for his wife for her beautiful hair.
Oh,
and
Edgar Allan Poe. The gift.
And she cuts her hair off to buy him a
gift of the Magi.
Yeah, gift of the Magi. I think this is a little bit of a kind of a gift of the Magi style gotcha, where it's like he finds the guitar, he has this dream, he thinks it's only a dream, he kills himself. Then we find out as the reader, right after he kills himself, oh my God, it wasn't a dream. Somehow he was really in touch with these other people, and now they've come to save the day, but it's too late for him.
Yeah,
that's the story that I think is being told here.
I'll buy that for $1. I'll buy that for $1.
Right.
And this is this theme here is very longing. The musical theme. It's used Beautiful. In the overture, and it just matches the story, the lyrics, the way Geddy sings. I mean, there's so much anguish in his voice. It's real. It's not like we're not saying this to it's like real. Like he really embodies the character in this. In a way, I don't think he does in any other Rush song. I mean,
no, really, I would agree with that. I mean, this is like in a way, and not in a bad way, in a good way. This is kind of like musical theater. He's playing like multiple parts here. I also think the other thing about Soliloquy that's amazing, my notes say simply the guitar solo, OMG. I think the guitar solo in Soliloquy is just awesome.
And you know what? I want to point out another thing here too, because I'm a huge fan of Genesis. Not as big. I like them. I just haven't gone deep in the catalogs of like Jethro Tull or King Crimson, which were the bands that these guys were really sort of looking up to when they were in this period of their music, right? They were looking at these bands, these progressive rock bands, mostly out of England, that were doing some musically like Rick Wakeman. I mean, how do you top what he does on the keyboards and as a composer?
Ralph, you don't. You just don't.
He's like a modern day Mozart, but the level and the depth of emotion and story, just sheer storytelling in 2112 is deeper and more touching than anything I've ever heard from anything by any of those other bands.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that is helpful in these narrative songs that Rush does, in particular in the early part of their career, is the narratives tend to be, and I don't mean this in a bad way, straightforward. Mm-hmm. They're understandable. The narrative comes across clearly in the lyrics, or clearly enough that you can interpret it as a narrative. There's not a lot of kind of poetic obfuscation in the words that are used or anything. So it's relatively easy to follow. And the interpretation really comes through the kind of interpretation that we were just doing, debating what actually happened. It's not because we don't know what Neil meant by this certain word, or what emotion he was trying to kind of like describe. It's a little bit more like, we just, there are interesting questions that the narrative brings up.
Yeah. And just so you don't think I'm a Rush fanboy, if you look at the theatricality of their look, their presentation in this era, with the space kimonos, the Panama Jack hat, compared to like Peter Gabriel and what he was doing theatrically, no comparison. Peter Gabriel wins that argument. But musically, storytelling, I should say storytelling wise, Rush just achieved something here that is without peer.
You know what? It's a really great point, Roth, and it reminds me again of The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, bringing up Genesis, bringing up Peter Gabriel at kind of the height of his theatricality. Mm-hmm. In Genesis, anyway. The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway is a single narrative as well, but it is very, it's it's
cerebral. It's nice.
It's difficult to follow. I mean, there are certain songs in there that that they fit into the narrative, but it's very difficult to tell. Like the Carpet Crawlers is one of the legendary songs off Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, but it's not entirely clear what's being described throughout the course of the Carpet Crawlers and how that fits into the overall narrative of the protagonist.
You think you're like, oh, that's very clever. That's very interesting. And it's very entertaining. It's a great song. It's a great album.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about like just the emotion, the humanity, is just so.
The narrative of that album is not what makes that a great album. And I would say that at least part of what makes 2112 a good song is the narrative, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah,
like
I think
it contributes as much as the music.
Yeah, just in this conversation.
Yeah.
So his lifeblood spills over, and then it goes into like a really happy, upbeat riff. It's very heroic.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's hear it. Let's listen to it. The section called Grand Finale from the song 2112, which is on the album 2112. So yeah, there's only one lyric in this entire section. Do you want to tell the folks what it is?
Attention, all planets of the Solar Federation. We have assumed control.
That's it.
Okay, so this is I feel like this is when people talk about the kind of narrative uncertainty and the cliffhanger of 2112, and what you mentioned, Getty said in My Effing Life, and has certainly been stated elsewhere, is this question. Is the Solar Federation being overthrown at the end of Grand Finale? And has, presumably the elder race assumed control? Or has the Solar Federation somehow reinstated control?
It was the Space Force, which no. So I think it's pretty crystal clear. It's the elder race returning to claim their homeland. The question for me is this like the light at the end of the tunnel as he slips off into death? Or is this reality and he missed it because he killed himself?
I think he missed it.
If he missed it, it's a tragedy.
It is a tragedy. That's why I think it's a tragedy.
If death sets him free, and I could see Neil Peart making this argument that death is better than living under an authoritarian rule.
Ooh, that's actually an angle I haven't contemplated yet.
Then death is the liberation. It's the apotheosis of the character, right? It's
I see. So you're saying that this is some kind of vision that he's having post-mortem.
I'm not saying that is. I'm saying this is the question.
No, that's what you're saying.
Is it a tragedy, or does he miss the liberation by killing himself? Or
I don't know.
Really,
the way that I think that what you're saying is like that is an even more tragic and dark vision of the song, I think.
Yeah, and with the music being so heroic and upbeat at the end too.
I think that it's a little bit more Twilight Zone. We're going to get to the song Twilight Zone. Clearly, Neil Peart is a fan of Twilight Zone. Twilight Zone was really known for these zinger endings where the thing happens that you don't expect right at the end. I think that this is in some ways a Twilight Zone song, right? This is he finds a guitar, he ends up having this vision of this amazing civilization. He thinks it's just a dream. He kills himself out of frustration. Then the thing that he thought was just a dream becomes real, and he's missed it because he killed himself. That feels to me like a very Twilight Zone kind of a way to end it. It's very dark. But I think that it at least comes with this idea. There is some hope in that while the protagonist is not going to live to see this future, at least the other citizens of Megalodon, what's it called? I've read that the city that's described in this has a name. I've read this a couple of different places. I don't know where I don't know where the source material is that the city has a name, but it's like Megadon or something like that.
Well,
anyway.
I think I would love to do some research to see if anyone has done a doctoral philosophy thesis on this.
I guarantee they have.
If they haven't, like, go with God and do that, child. It's a lot to process, but it's very it's multi-layered musically, lyrically, in so many ways. Even when it gets down to what was going on with the band at the time, you can see how they're sort of fuck it, let's do this attitude goes right up into the end when the lifeblood spills. It's just great. It's very deep though. It makes you want to travel the world to find a joint to smoke after. And
Rob, that was an amazing segue. So artful.
You bring it home. You bring it home.
I don't know what to say other than why don't we listen to Passage to Bangkok?
Sweet Jamaican bright greens, a golden Acapulco nights, then Morocco and the East. Fly by morning light, we're on the train to Bangkok, aboard the Thailand Express.
All right. So Passage to Bangkok, 3 minutes and 34 seconds. Tight little song. Actually, the rest of the songs on the record are tight, but 3 minutes and 34 seconds. Why don't we talk about the lyrics?
Yeah.
To start.
I would say from a storytelling perspective, this song is more fantasy than 2112 for the band, because the themes that were discussed in 2112 were very real and present to the band, things they had experienced. Whereas The Passage to Bangkok, as Geddy Lee says in his book, they had never been west of Vancouver or east of London when they wrote this song. So they're making it's like James Taylor's Mexico. He'd never been to Mexico and he wrote a song about it. Although he does admit that he'd never been there in the song. So
I don't know that I'd be comfortable making the argument that this song is less literal than 2112 is, but I see where you're going with that, Raph, and it's taken in the spirit it was intended, I think. Personally,
well, if we just parroted what's already been said about these songs, this wouldn't be the Backtracking Podcast featuring Rush.
I think that this song lyrically is so incredibly awesome. I just love it. I think that it is this picture of these kind of traveling pot smokers. It's totally unclear whether they're smugglers or what, but it in some ways it doesn't matter. It's just like, we're going to travel all over the world and smoke pot all over the world, which I just think is such a funny idea for a song.
Well, and for such a heavy song to precede it, like, this is Neil Peart having fun. I mean, it must have been a blast to write the lyrics. Our first stop is in Bogota to check Colombian fields.
I love it.
Natives smile and pass along a sample of their yields.
So I love this song. I still love this song on re-listen. When I was a kid, I loved this song. I have got to say, when we were, 8th grade, 9th grade, whatever it was, when we were really I was really starting to get into Rush and we were hanging out all the time. There were some drug songs that were incredibly popular, like Casey Jones, the Grateful Dead song. Very, very. This song was, to me, so much cooler than any of those songs. Yeah. Did it glamorize marijuana usage? Yes, it did.
Well, this was the first, I believe, at least in my canon of memory, this was the first Rush song I think I had ever heard. And the way I heard it, I remember relatively poorly played, but good for his age, my brother Ara playing this riff. Da 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 da. Wow. It wasn't played with the same level of technical skill that Alex Lifeson, but he had just started learning guitar. I think this might have been one of the first riffs he played. But I remember that Passage to Bangkok opening riff. Yeah. Absent the sort of vaguely racist Chinese or Asian inspired sort of. I
know. I don't think that you could record this song these days. I think you'd get canceled for that riff. So just to close out the lyrics, maybe for me, the one other thing I just wanted to point out is there's this great fun little throwaway line in there where they say "fly by morning light."
Yes.
I know. I love it. I love that they're referencing themselves in this song. It's really fun.
But it's very optimistic too, right? Yeah. It's fly by, and the way it's sung and the words, as they're written, is very optimistic. Yeah, it's carrying in the theme of this. Fuck it all. We're gonna have fun. Like, we're going out with a bang. We're flying by morning light, bitches.
I love it. All right, so can we talk about the music?
Yes.
All right, the first thing I'm going to say is this song, in my opinion, completely blows away the second song on the album, Curse, that Rush has had for the past 3 records. I've said in the previous episodes that I feel like the second song on the album is always the shittiest song on the album.
Except on the fourth album.
that is not the case here. I mean, I think this song is an absolute banger.
I would say this was growing up, this was always like the A-list. This was the top track, even more than 2112. Like this was the song off this album because again, it was my entry into Rushdom.
Really? I think that's so cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
so another thing,
the riff, I mean, it's just as iconic a riff as the 2112. Dun, dun,
Yeah.
dun, 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 and the guitar sound is just so,
it's so great. And can we talk about
the perfect espresso?
The guitar riff, as you've said, it is amazing. But what's even more amazing, and I think it's the first time that I've heard Rush do this in their catalog, is the second time he played the second bar of that verse. He harmonizes with himself. So there's a second track of Alex playing the riff, but he's playing it up.
Yeah,
I don't know by how much, but it's that. You know, the first time it's just the one guitar and it goes then the second time through he goes there's one going like not quite. I don't know what the interval is. You would probably be able to figure that out because you're not a drummer.
I recall Ara, and if he's listening to this is a good test to see if he's listening to the entire episode. If I recall him recording, my brother recording the main line and then playing it back and playing the harmony.
Yeah,
his recording. So Ara, text me or let me know if you listened to this far. If you did that or not.
But I actually felt like that was a really interesting innovation or shift for Alex. Again, I'm not 100% certain that he never does that on the rest of the catalog, but I believe this is the first time that he actually is playing a second guitar part and just doing a straight harmony with the primary part.
Yeah, and if you want to hear more about guitar harmonies, just wait for the backtracking Iron Maiden.
I know. That's exactly what I was thinking of in here.
You know what's interesting? This thought just came into my head, as do so many other thoughts that I spare you. But you know, so just hearkening back to when I said my brother played this riff. So that would have been like around 1986, maybe 85, probably 86 or 87. And this album would have been like 8 or 9 years old by then. And it's interesting because I recall when I got into Rush, I didn't like, I would listen to whatever the latest album was and I would get it. And that started at Hold Your Fire. But when you go back to their catalog, like what was the rhyme or reason for how we got into, I remember I'd get into like Hemispheres and then I would get into Signals, then back to Farewell. Like there, because back then you would buy an album, kids, and you would like listen to it. And it would just sit in your CD player on your record table or your tape deck or whatever. And you would like develop a relationship with it because you didn't want to have to keep changing them out and everything. And you would actually listen, you'd look at the album art. And I'm wondering what drove that, you know, when you'd go to the record store, which catalog of any band for that matter, you would go buy. Like,
it's interesting. I think it's really interesting. I don't remember when we were that age, certainly, or when I was that age, I don't remember paying really any attention to the sequence of albums in a band's catalog. But I did get to a point when I was probably 17, 18, 19, where I obsessively would listen to things in sequence. So like, let's say I found a band that I liked, like I just happened to listen to an album that I thought was really good. And it was like the band's third album. Mm-hmm. The first thing I'd do after I heard that third album is I'd buy their first album and their second album and listen to those in sequence to try and kind of understand the development of the band over albums. So that was something that I was very into, but I definitely was not into that as much in high school. I don't think. I think that was a little bit later.
Yeah. I remember like 86, 87. I wanted to find out what Rush's catalog was. So I tried going to Wikipedia, but I couldn't even get online.
Yeah.
That was
That's
joke.
right. You just kept on. You just kept on calling. I remember. Side note, but in those days, that was when I think you guys had a modem as well, right, on your computer?
Yeah. So the first email messages I had sent were to you. They weren't even emails. They were just messages on a BBS system.
Yeah.
That we would just pick a BBS system, and we tried downloading. I don't know if you did, but I would try downloading like a naked picture of a woman, and I would set the download to start.
Did I ever try that?
10 or 11 at night, and it would take until like 4 in the morning. And you'd have to, don't use the phone. I'm downloading something. I'm using the internet. That was the internet back then.
Yeah, no, I totally remember that. My favorite memory of that is we would. I can't remember if it was. I think it was Seth Haran had a BBS. One of the Haran brothers ran a BBS on their computer at home.
Yeah.
And
did he wear all black?
I don't know what we
Cysops, like all the Cysops like would wear all black. That was like the thing.
I just I remember calling their BBS, but the funny thing that would happen is you would have your computer dial their house basically.
Yeah.
And the modem had a speaker on it, and their mom would answer the phone and hear the modem make that modem noise and be like, "Seth, it's a computer again." You could like hear her yell at her son that it's
I never had that
Seth,
happen.
it's a computer again, and he was like, "Just all right, I'll put it on the modem."
Oh, geez. But yeah, I do vividly remember. This is sort of going off on a tangent here, but it might be a nice story if you're smoking a J while we're talking about a passage to Bangkok. I remember when you went to Denison, I was like, we got to use email now? Like, what's email? Like, how do you, you got to get like a disk from your, computer lab and that using email from home at the time required actually installing a WinSock client on your PC. I was using a PC because the software didn't come with TCP/IP protocols built in.
Yeah.
You actually had to download a client specifically for the express use of connecting and establishing a TCP/IP connection with another computer.
Well, I think this whole section, Rafi, in case there was anyone who felt like doing an in-depth Rush podcast was not nerdy enough, I think we just delivered the additional level of nerdiness that is going to be required for people to feel confident that we're absolute dorks. Why don't we move on to Twilight Zone? Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
No. I mean, it's great. It's a great song. There's not much there. It's fun, and I think we touched on all the hot takes. So let's listen to the next song. We referenced the Twilight Zone in 2112, and if you weren't convinced that the band were total like Rod Serling fans, I think this song will convince you otherwise. So this is the Twilight Zone off of Rush's 2112 album.
Strange things I know. Use the key, unlock the door. See what your fate might have in store.
All right, Rapid 21 Twilight Zone. 3 minutes and 17 seconds of Lee and Lifeson music and pure lyrics.
Yeah, and I want to congratulate you on not saying okay. You said
okay.
Yeah, right.
All right. So I've got one thing that I want to say about the lyrics before we get started. Yes. My opinion of this song, when I read through the lyrics and listened to the song again, and you're going to have to kind of go with me here. This song is reminiscent of a 1980s Kenny Loggins soundtrack song to me. You know what I'm talking about? Kenny Loggins, the king of 1980s soundtracks. I hear it,
but I don't think it falls in the yacht rock category.
No, it's musically it's not the same, but lyrically it reminds me of the same. And here's what I would say about that. Kenny Loggins songs like Danger Zone and It's All Right were the most vapid lyrics ever. They were absolutely about nothing. It was like somebody approached him. Some agent said, "Hey, Kenny, do you want to do a song for Caddyshack?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure." And then he just like wrote some lyrics that were like, "Caddyshack, going on golfing now." You know what I mean? And it's just like totally dumb.
They were like jingles.
And I feel like there's no meaning to this song. He's just kind of like, he's basically just saying in these lyrics, Twilight Zone, isn't that a cool show? You know what I mean?
So this song, I love the chorus. It's so mellow and smooth. And you know what is I don't smoke marijuana. I don't use edible. I have, but I just don't do it. But if you do, what a great song to get stoned to after you listen to Passage of Bangkok, because it's just like, not just lyrically, but the sound of the chorus with the whispering, you have entered the Twilight Zone, because they're whispering on top of the lyrics. So this was actually written spontaneously in the studio. They didn't go into the studio with any plans to record this. The band would record and write songs spontaneously in the studio, and there's been a handful that they've done throughout their catalog, and this was the first, which apparently was a very enjoyable experience for the guys in the band. But again, another really light, fun song. And I don't think that was an accident that they put these two very light, fun songs after 2112, because again, very heavy thematically, and you got to balance a little, the sweet with the sour, or the sour with the sweet, rather.
I will say that lyrically, I think that this is a fairly dumb song. I don't like the lyrics of this song, but I like the music reasonably well. I don't like the opening of the song, but one thing that I think is notable, again, we have another moment of Alex harmonizing with Alex here. Yeah, second song in a row. And I think it is I think this is like kind of the first couple of times he's ever done this in their catalog, which I thought was interesting.
And yet another song I vividly recall my brother Ara playing relatively, mediocrely. But it's the
poorly, averagely.
Well enough. But imagine like he might have been like 13-year-old playing this on the guitar without the context of the drums or the rhythm guitar. It's just like a squealing. But I remember it, and I remember hearing the song. I was like, oh, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, for those who don't know, he ended up becoming an amazing guitarist, and so it's not like he remained playing these songs, these riffs, poorly.
So I would agree with what you said about the chorus. I think that the chorus to this song is really the part of the song that's great. I think the verses, at least for me, musically, I'm not in love with. I feel like they kind of sound a little bit goofy. But when you get into that chorus after that do 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 do, and then it's like the really kind of languid, moody chorus, I love that part.
Yeah, and the way, again, the lyrics and the music dance together really nice, where he's singing, use the key, unlock the door.
Yeah.
See what your fate might have in store. And then the squeal into the guitar.
Yeah. Oh my God. That squeal. Moments. It's got some great moments. No, and I also second what you said. The whisper of the lyrics that comes in on the second instance of the chorus behind his singing is very creepy and very cool.
Yes. Yeah.
And my last comment about the music or the recording here, and we may have to pause so you can go and listen to this, is at 1 minute and 9 seconds, there's a very weird sound that almost it sounds out of place. And I was like, are they actually doing a sound effect of use the key to unlock the door? It almost sounds like a lock or a door being opened or something.
No, I hear, I know what you're talking about. And there are moments where there are sort of extraneous sounds that come in. I don't know if it was intentional or not. Usually it's not intentional and it just sort of shows up there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, that was,
again, not much more to say about this other than what we said.
This is a meh one for me. This is it has moments for sure, but I think overall this isn't one of my favorite Rush songs.
Well, let's listen to the next song, Lessons, because this one I have a little bit of some history to this, which is I think will be of interest to our listeners. So this is Lessons off of Rush 2112.
Yeah.
So this song was one of two songs that Alex Lifeson wrote entirely. I think the second song was, I forgot what the name of it was. I'll look it up, but it's on Snakes and Arrows. So it was a long time. but if you just listen to the lyrics and you don't have the context for it, it's a weird song. He's singing about sweet memories, and then he's like, you don't listen, you don't listen.
Yeah.
It's like what is this about? So tell me what it is about to you.
Honestly, I read the lyrics and I really tried to think about them. My notes are, this feels pretty thin. I think you could interpret this as a dialogue between two people. Like there's some kind of an authority figure that's in the chorus, and then there's like more of like the protagonist in the verses. But I think that, at least for me, making the assertion that that's what this song is would be kind of a long walk. I'd be pushing it. So I just kind of felt like this was like a pretty generic meh lyric.
Yeah. So let me put a little bit of cornstarch in there and thicken it up for you.
All right.
So this song apparently is sort of like a Alex arguing with his parents. So he wanted to be a musician, and his parents were resistant, and they didn't really support him in that. I think eventually they came around, at least they should have. And it's basically him thinking about when he, like, his passion for music and being told he can't do it or should have a backup plan or whatever. But there was a documentary that was made in 1973 called Come On Children. It was a Canadian documentary where they followed a handful of kids, Canadian kids, teenagers, and while they sort of figure out life and what they want to do with their life. And one of the teens, who was, I think he was a junior in high school, that was featured in this hour-and-a-half documentary, which is available online, was Alex Zivajanovich. And
Alex Zivajanovich.
There's a scene, but he's in a lot of scenes in this. Like, I mean, he's playing his guitar, electric guitar, for a bunch of kids. And so it's a really interesting insight into early Rush, because it's shot on 16 millimeter film. It's a relatively high quality for the era and the medium it was shot on. But there's a scene, and you can look this up on YouTube. So on YouTube, look up Rush Alex Lifeson and his parents argue about his future. It's about a 7-minute, 30-second clip of him at his parents' house talking about him doing music and why he doesn't need to study at school, and his parents trying to convince him otherwise. And that really, from what I can gather from the research I've done in this song, is the essence of what Lessons is about. So go watch that documentary. I'll wait. And it's an hour and a half. No, go watch that documentary and then come back and listen to the song. And I think it's still relatively thin. I'm not going to argue that it isn't, but I think it'll add a little bit more context to help you enjoy it.
Well, I have not seen that documentary, although I have heard a little bit about it. But I will absolutely go away and watch that, Rafi. So you want to talk about the music a little bit?
Yeah. So for being an Alex song, you go, I was just going to say, for being an Alex song, it's not like the greatest guitar riff. I mean, it's got some rock and guitar stuff, but it's mostly acoustic or, clean guitar. And there's not really anything, even the guitar solo, there's nothing remarkable from a guitarist's perspective on this.
No, I would say that the only thing that was remarkable about the guitar to me was that there's a moment in the bridge where Alex harmonizes with Geddy's vocals on guitar.
You didn't listen again, where he says, "You didn't listen again."
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that Alex is definitely discovering something in this, and where he's like, oh yeah, it'd be kind of cool if I harmonized with stuff, including myself on the guitar. I would agree. Pretty forgettable. The bass, I think overall the composition here is pretty forgettable. The bass, though, this song is really the song that made me kind of think, like, or maybe notice, like, gosh, like, Geddy is so busy in this song. There is a little lick that he plays in the beginning of the chorus that is like a very fast Steve Harris style kind of like triplet thing. Do you know what I'm saying?
I don't.
He like goes, it's like on the bass, and it sticks out to me because it's like, I just think busier than some of the bass playing that he's done on the previous records. But
by the way, playing those Steve Harris like Roland like trip, like that's 1,000 times harder than anything that I've tried to learn of Rush.
Really. And I mean,
impossible. Like,
he does them in this song. I mean, if I'm not go listen to it, but he does them in this song in the beginning of that chorus they're so fast. It's like Steve Harris would be like, whoa.
I'm going to go listen to it. Again, learning all the time on the Rush.
Okay. Well, I could be wrong too. Feel free to correct me if I am. So, but yeah, I mean, I would say, I think that we're kind of in the same place. For me, I think that this is like barely serviceable rock. And as if to prove how barely serviceable it is, you will notice that it has a weak ass fade out at the end.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So
the lyrics are just so still you question why. No, you didn't listen again. No, whoa, you didn't listen again.
It's just,
I don't know who's talking. I'm assuming it's a dialogue between his parents and his parents. I'm going to ask him. I'm going to find him and ask him.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I think Lessons is pretty forgettable. 3 minutes and 51 seconds. I think probably the fact that it's relatively short is the best thing about it. It's not bad. It's just pretty average. I don't think it's a standout. You want to move on to Tears, Roth?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any more to unpack. I think watching the documentary might give you everything you need.
All right. Well, let's find out, Roth. What will touch you deeper?
Tears that fall from eyes that only cry.
That fall from my behind.
Okay, let's we're not doing it justice. Let's take a listen to this. This is Tears off of 2112.
What would touch me deeper? Tears that fall from eyes that only cry. Would it touch you deeper than tears that fall from eyes that know?
Oh, Roth. Pulling the heartstrings. It's like taking my heartstrings and it's just yanking them.
Yeah, this was written by Getty, right? He wrote the lyrics.
Getty wrote the lyrics to this song.
Yeah.
Amazing. So I think that there's a lot to talk about in the lyrics here, and I really I actually think that these are terrific lyrics, and I'm going to talk, if you'll indulge me, for a little bit about why. It is maybe a love song. It feels a bit like a love song, but I love the fact that it's unclear who this song is about specifically, and it's just really expressing a very sweet set of emotions. These are not direct lyrics at all. It is not narrative at all. And I think that contrast is something, that contrast with like the rest of the songs on the album, well, maybe not Lessons as we've talked about, but like if you contrast like the lyrical content of Tears with 2112, I think it's just a really nice juxtaposition.
Yeah, I mean, this song for me musically is a bit depressing. This.
So you don't have anything to talk about with the lyrics though. You're just gonna say fuck the lyrics, fuck the song, fuck it all.
No, the lyrics are deep and they're touching, but they're also depressing.
Yeah.
This was one of the first song that Rush did that does feature the Mellotron. I think you had mentioned they didn't use the Mellotron in 2112.
Yes,
they used the Mini Moog, but this was the first song that featured the Mellotron. I want to go on the record as saying, and I know this is controversial, I think the Beatles used the Mellotron better than Rush did in the song. They used this for the string pad.
Yeah.
The opening to Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, I think, was more interesting than the string pads that we heard here. This was more, to me, it was like that kind of like dated early 70s prog rocky. I mean, that's what we're talking about, but it was, it's not, it's iconic, but it's not like, for me, it's not like what inspires, the admiration of that era.
I am going to perfectly disagree with you, Ralph.
Okay.
I love this song, and in particular, I love the Mellotron. I my notes here, literally, I wrote, "Gotta love that Mellotron." I love Mellotron generally because it has this awesome warbly analog feel. It is like very fake sounding, but incredibly warm sounding. So, to compare, for example, a Moog with a Mellotron, which are both used kind of by Rush around this time, obviously they're doing very different things and they generate very different tones, but I prefer the Mellotron vastly. I just love the warmth and like analogness of the way that it sounds. And I think it actually gives this, I think Mellotron can give things a dated sound, and I think this song probably does sound a bit dated, but I just think it's so warmth. It reminded me mostly of almost a Moody Blues type song.
Yeah, I don't like the Moody Blues.
Okay, well then maybe it's not your song.
It's not my song.
Now, something came up. I've been reading. My sister very thoughtfully purchased me for Christmas a book called Rush Album by Album by Martin Popoff. I'm really, really enjoying the book. Mostly, I'm enjoying the way it's structured because it really has kind of a chapter on each of the albums, and I think it makes it it makes it a great reference book for doing this podcast. But one thing that came up. The book is structured so that there's a short section of history on each album, and then there's essentially a number of people who are interviewed about the album, and they're people both who are affiliated with Rush, and like Kirk Hammett from Metallica is one of the people who's interviewed. But there's a whole dialogue in the 2112 album section about this song and a discussion about Neil Peart's drumming. And one of the people who is interviewed in that makes the assertion around this song that he would prefer for John Rutsey to have played this song than Neil Peart, because he thinks Neil Peart really overplays in this song. And I just wanted to actually put that out there to you.
I never thought of it, but it seems like it's a logical thing to say. It's not like it's completely off base.
Yeah, I his drumming does not bother me in this song because I in so many ways I feel like when I come to Rush, I kind of come to expect Neil Peart, and whether it's overplaying or not, it's kind of the way he plays, and that's just kind of what you get when you listen to Rush.
Context, because I think John Rutsey, you would run the risk of overplaying in terms of rocking too hard. He might not have played as many notes, but I think Neil Peart has more capabilities to do it thoughtfully. Maybe I think a happy medium would be to direct or to produce Neil Peart to play less. Maybe.
I would be curious to know how that conversation would go for a producer. I don't know, but my sense is maybe he wasn't for most of his career too open to suggestions on his playing.
Well, this is why we say
for good reason. I mean, right? He's
Terry
legendary.
Brown.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I just thought that was an interesting little note. The last very personal thing that I'd point out here, not relevant to too many people. This song I associate, we've talked about this with some other songs. I associate this song very, very clearly with like 8th grade, 9th grade. There was a mixtape that I made of songs that I would listen to take a nap between football practices I don't know if you kind of remember in like football in the summer, you'd have double sessions. You'd have like 2 practices a day, and you'd have like a few hours between practices. Every day during the summer, I'd go home between those 2 practices and take a nap. And I would put on this mixtape every day to fall asleep to. And this song was definitely on it.
Did you shower between the practices?
I do not remember whether I showered. I probably showered, but I may not have. I'm not certain. But I definitely took a nap, and I definitely listened to this Rush tape, which included some Led Zeppelin for sure. this Rush song definitely, and I really don't remember anything else.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean this song is one that I don't have really much opinions on either way, other than what I've already expressed. But it would be interesting to go back and listen to it again and see if Neil's playing is a little too heavy-handed.
Well, this is
figuratively.
I think the fact that you kind of said you don't like this song, it's just really sad. This may be a core difference between our musical tastes.
I said that it doesn't really do it for me. It's not.
All right.
It's not my favorite.
Well, why don't we move on to Something for Nothing to see if maybe that does it for you, Raf?
Yeah, I think people are probably using this podcast to go to sleep by now because it's like 2 hours long. So we got to talk a little bit faster now because we were criticized that we need to talk a little bit faster. So we're gonna talk a little. So this next song is called "Something for Nothing." It's the last song on the last song on the album by Rush, 2112. "Something for Nothing." Let's give it a listen.
Wow, you don't got something for nothing. You can have freedom for free. You won't get wise with the sleeves still in your eyes, no matter what your dream might be.
Yeah, this is the Rush I know. This is the good old bleeding heart libertarian Neil Peart.
Yeah, I mean lyrically, I really don't think there's any new ground here. For me, this song it articulates the same kind of libertarian self-reliant stuff that Neil hits on in a number of songs, in particular Anthem. I think this is most evocative of Anthem. But I think one thing that's kind of interesting to me, it's back to the tone that the song "Take a Friend" had on the eponymous debut album Rush. Mm-hmm. It just feels like the band is yelling at somebody. It's done much more artfully here, but it's still the same to me.
I've got a hot take. Okay, hearkening back to the grand finale of 2112. Now imagine you're like a general from the elder race and you've just assumed control of the Solar Federation.
Okay.
You go into this cave and you see the protagonist and he's got lifeblood coming from his hands, but he's alive and you heal him up.
Oh, he's alive.
And then
it must not be lifeblood then, Raf. It just must be blood.
And they say to him, you can't have something for nothing. You can't have freedom for free. You won't get by with the sleep still in your eyes, no matter what you're...
And then he kicks him in the ribs.
Yeah, so maybe this is the elder race returning to tell him, like, we're here, now get off your ass and stop feeling sorry for yourself. And
strongly
no matter what your dream might be, you gotta like do it.
I don't like this take. I think this is I don't like this take. Unsubscribe. This is crazy. I feel like this is it's a good song. I like this song quite a bit, but lyrically I just feel like it's a retread of Anthem. Musically though, can we move on to that?
Yeah. So this was the first, by the way, this was one of the first bass parts that I learned too, that I played very poorly as well when I was learning bass.
Wow. Okay.
So it's got that very, melodic bass opening.
Yeah, it does have that. It's a very melodic bass opening. And then the bass in the chorus, again, I feel like is just fast and furious, kind of Steve Harris-esque again. Is that wrong?
No, it's right. And I remember playing it. The chorus always felt a little, I don't want to say embryonic or not fully formed, but it seemed a little sophomoric. Like you could write a better chorus musically in terms of the chord progression. And what I mean by that is if you're in a middle school band, you could probably write that chord progression. Just like the "you didn't listen again."
Yeah.
There's nothing like, and this isn't a critique of Rush per se. I mean,
sounds like a critique of Rush, Raf.
One of the things I've said, and you'll hear me say this, especially as we get into like the synth era, is that one of the things that was the genius of especially Alex Lifeson was, I mean, he invented and created these chord progressions that are just mind blowing. Like I don't know, like that's sort of the litmus test for me is like, is this something that I could write? Is this something that I can do? And for 99.99999% of what Rush does, I'm like blown away because I'm like, where did they even get the inspiration to do much of this stuff? Yeah. But here, not really. Or in memories or lessons rather. I'm like, yeah, I could come up with that riff. And so we get two of those in one album, but we also get some amazing works of genius too.
I would agree with you that I think generally I really like this song. I feel like it's a very live sounding song and a very rockin' song. I think that the herky jerky counting thing that they've now been doing for 2 albums and are getting increasingly effective at, I actually think works the best so far in this song. So do you know kind of what section I'm referring to?
No, because I don't hear any hurdy-gurdy on this song either.
Herky jerky, Rob. Herky jerky counting, and
Okay.
it's and then it goes. You know that part?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think it works really well. It fits very organically in this song in a way that I would argue it doesn't even fit into 2112. However, they fade this song out dumbly and lazily. They fade this song out when clearly what they should have done to end this song is they should have gone back to that herky jerky riff and ended with that. Think about that for a second.
I will. I'm going to contemplate that as I drift off to sleep tonight.
I think I just blew your mind out of your asshole is what I just did.
Hang on, let me check.
Rush, listen, I know that you're
still
probably but you're probably not going to record any more albums, but there's nothing that, these jerk off producers can do for you that I can't do. I mean, Terry Brown, Pshaw.
But I think it's worth noting for me that the spontaneous studio album, Twilight Zone, I like better than the last 3 songs on this album.
Well, why don't we get to best song and worst song? You want to just put a pin in the whole thing and end it there?
Yeah, I'm best song 2112. Hands down.
Interesting.
I think we need to go deeper though. I would say Temples of Syrinx. It's
okay.
So iconic. I think we have to get into like the actual section because
I'll allow it. I'll allow that.
Okay, so 2112 section 2. Maybe
Excellent.
1.
All right. So for me, best song on this album, Passage to Bangkok. I'm gonna go with it. I debated 2112, but
no, I see that.
I actually, what was interesting for me is if we allowed naming a movement in Fountain of Lamnath as your favorite song, which I think we did in the last episode, I kind of went through 2112. I think 2112 as an entire piece is really great, but there is no one movement in it that I like, that I think would be better without the rest of the song. Whereas with Fountain of Lamnath, that's exactly how I felt. I felt like, no One at the Bridge could stand alone and would be better if it was just kind of its own song in some ways.
Yeah.
But 2112, it was harder for me to kind of pick apart. And so I think just as a consistently strong whole, I felt like Passage to Bangkok was my favorite.
Well, thank you for not picking the Spite song and saying Tears for.
Yeah, no. I like Tears, but it's not my favorite. So what about worst song, Ralph?
Worst song, I can't do this to Alex Lifeson and pick Lessons, and it's not my least favorite song. I would have to go with Tears.
Wow,
There's
well,
one song. And folks, when we say worst song, it's not like we hate the song. It's not like, it's just, if I had to skip over a song listening to this, I would skip over Tears. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Wow. That is the wrong choice. That's the first time, Ralph, that you've made an objectively bad choice since we've been doing the podcast, but that's okay. Listen, you can't bat 1,000.
History will be the determiner in that.
History will be the Terminator. Did you say?
It will determine that.
All right. So worst song, in my opinion, Twilight Zone. I just feel like Twilight. No, you're surprised, but I feel like I feel like it's even more inconsistent than Lessons. And I feel like lyrically it's dumb.
I'm literally speechless.
I feel like it's as though the producers of Twilight Zone came to Rush and said, hey, listen, we're going to make a movie. We want for you guys to do the soundtrack. Make sure the lyrics are just exactly about Twilight Zone and go no deeper than that.
I think there's something endearing about the fact that was written on the spot, in the studio, in the moment. I like the music. I think there are a lot of notable elements to it, which are unique, especially considering the circumstances under which it was written. I think it's in the top. How many songs are on the album? So it's in the top 5 songs on the album.
I think that it belongs on a mixtape with a bunch of Kenny Loggins soundtrack songs.
Yeah, and you know what? Whoever gives that mixtape to someone is going to get laid more than the mixtape with tears on it.
That's you know what? That's actually fair. All right, Ralph. Well, I guess that brings us to the end of an epic 2112 episode. Next week on the pod, we are going to be covering our first live album, All the World's a Stage. All the World's a Stage.
With potentially some special guests. We don't know yet.
We are hoping to have a guest join us.
Only one way to find out.
We're gonna listen to the live album. We're gonna talk about the live album. We're not gonna do a song by song breakdown. We're instead just gonna kind of appreciate the live album overall. Talk a little bit about the studio albums that are kind of covered in that live album, and have a freeform conversation about this era of Rush with whoever our special guest ends up being.
Yeah, and we like to always say, thank you to everyone who's listening. We really sure do appreciate it. Just because we don't like talking into the void, we'd rather there be some human flesh in that void with the sound of our voices hitting their eardrums.
Ralph loves human flesh in his void. You heard it here first.
I'm just trying to keep up the surreal 2112 vibe. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but use your imagination like we did listening to this wonderful album by the rock band Rush.
And please,
heard about.
Please keep listening, subscribe, write a review, send us an email, backtrackingrocks, ROX, @gmail.com with any corrections, any requests, any suggestions, any thoughts, or any feedback that you've got for us.
Yeah.
And then also please follow us on Instagram @backtrackingrocks, ROX, and on Twitter @backtrackingrocks, ROX.
So long. No fade out this time, kids.
Later.